Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Tuesday, July 30th. Happy Trade Deadline Day. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here. Special shout out to the Live Hive watching us on YouTube. Britt Giroli will join us a little bit later in the show. We're going to cover everything happening up to today's deadline, kind of picking up where we left off yesterday, Eno. And I think if we count the whole window, going back the last week, 10 days, this has been a great trade deadline. There are tons of active teams. And I think this is the kind of day where we might even get a few last-minute deals of some note, too.
Yeah, the Pirates are sneaking a couple position players in under the wire. Mm-hmm. They're buying. The Pirates are buying.
The Marlins doing maybe the quick rebuild, making a ton of moves, a couple of huge trades for them.
So many players. It's almost like you got to really take out a microscope on their 40-man, and we'll have to look at their depth charts and figure out who's going to play this year and who's going to play later. And pretty exciting. I also think though that maybe it is due to the hype machine and some of the stuff going into it where we want to put bigger names on the block than are actually on the block. But if you're going to sit here and tell me that Tarek Skubal and Garrett Crochet and Blake Snell are going to, be traded, then I am going to maybe look at the list and say, Yusei Kikuchi and Jack Flaherty got traded, and say, it was a dud. So, I mean, it's a little bit maybe our responsibility as part of the media in terms of raw moves, in terms of people, actually doing things despite it being, a seller's market. I thought it's been pretty good.
Yeah, it's been full of moves. I love it. Friedrich in the Live Hive says, if the Giants don't trade Snell, I walk into the Pacific. Pick a warm part of the Pacific. I recommend Southern California to Northern California.
Yeah.
Seeing on Twitter, if Brian Rocchio is still on the Guardians roster in 3 hours, I'm going to drink a bottle of ketchup. Wouldn't recommend that. Probably not a good idea. I like ketchup all right. Not that much.
Yeah, the Guardians turn out. That's so funny. The Guardians turn out shortstop after shortstop and are renowned for being a pitching machine. And they go and get Alex Cobb and maybe leave Brian Rocchio at shortstop. It's
okay. They got an upgrade. They got Lane Thomas. We'll get into that one here in just a couple of minutes. But let's get caught up on some of the big trades that have happened since you and I last spoke on Monday evening. Yusei Kikuchi could be the best starting pitcher moved at this deadline. We'll see what happens in these next 20 minutes or so. 4-player deal, and a lot of people think this was a huge return for the Blue Jays because Kikuchi will be a free agent at the end of the season, so this is purely a rental. It's Jake Bloss, Joey Loperfido, and Will Wagner all going back to the Blue Jays, but I think people just underrate Yusei Kikuchi. We saw skills growth last year. He sustained it through this season. The results haven't been there in terms of the ERA and WHIP getting to where they should be for the strikeout and walk rates that Kikuchi is posting. But I think if you're an Astros fan, and if you're looking at this from a fantasy perspective, you're excited about Kikuchi going to Houston.
Yeah, I really value the conversation that I've had with many people about Kikuchi since it came out. Talked with Matan K on Twitter and Alex Chamberlain. And there was a lot of different, and then, in our Discord, we talked about Kikuchi. I got DMs from different people. Most of them were polite. So that was enjoyable. I mean, what I'm saying that he's better than Jack Flaherty, it's a stuff play. He throws harder than Jack Flaherty. He has a fastball that looks similar to Kikuchi does to Tyler Glasnow's. And a 90-mile-an-hour slider. Guess who has a harder slider than Kikuchi among qualified starters? Tyler Glasnow. So, it's a high stuff thing. As some people have pointed out, he has allowed a higher exit velocity than other pitchers. It's not something I traditionally look at. But when you're 700 plus innings in and he's shown that tendency, it's something to think about, I guess. It's also, he has a 309 career BABIP, 340 this year, though. Kikuchi, despite the Blue Jays being a well-regarded defensive team by most statistics. So I think there's still a fair amount of luck in here, even if maybe the location numbers aren't sophisticated enough to capture the fact that his command is still a problem. It was a problem before. Maybe it still is a problem, and that's led to some of this hard contact against him. But if I'm going to go into the postseason, I just want a guy who throws wicked hard and has great stuff. And I think Kikuchi's ahead of Flaherty on my list, but a lot of smart people disagree with me. In any case, what they gave up is also a little bit overrated, I think. Joey Loperfido strikes out too much and is probably a corner outfield first baseman defensively. That's where he was played by the team that was using him. And he's going to have to hit for a ton of power to overcome some of those strikeout issues. So he may not be a regular. And then Jake Bloss has a pretty good fastball, pretty good slider. He kind of strikes me as like a little bit lesser version of Spencer Schwellenbach, where it's a good fastball, good slider. You don't know about the curve and the change. Neither is an elite pitch. And so it's, it's kind of profiles 4, 5, 6 to me, which of course, when it's cheap, is still pretty exciting for the Blue Jays. But I don't know that this was such the overpay that people will expect. I mean, just look at what happened with the best rental reliever on the market. Tanner Scott goes out and gets traded in a 4-player deal as well. And he gets Robbie Snelling back, whose command has cratered. The same similar thing. Guys who you're like, oh, I know these names, oh, this must be a good haul. But it's like, I don't know if you've noticed, but Robbie Snelling's command is really cratered. Adam Mazur came up and kind of showed us that his fastball is not great. And showed us he had some struggle striking out major league batters. I forget who else is in the deal. Graham Pauley may not be a regular hitter, in terms of pairing that defense and power quality somewhere on the diamond. He may be kind of like a third baseman who doesn't hit enough to be a third baseman, So it's not obvious to me that they overpaid, but they definitely paid for a high-end rental and gave up names that people recognize. So those are the two overpays on the market today, I guess.
Yeah, but the Padres' late inning situation is really tight now, right? Because you already had Robert Suarez pitching really well. You added Jason Adam in a separate trade. Now you got Tanner Scott in the mix as well. So it could be lights out from the 7th inning on, and the middle guys aren't bad either. It's going to be interesting to see how that bullpen holds up down the stretch, given some of the demands the rotation might put on them. Could be heavy workloads for that group in the final 2 months. But I think Snelling's is pretty fun buy low for the Marlins. He's so young. He's not going to turn 21 until December. He was Baseball America's pitcher of the year last year. Yeah, he made it to Double-A last season. So even though things haven't gone great for him in 2024, given his age, that's a great profile to bet on, a guy that could be an impact starter sooner rather than later, despite how things have gone this year. So to get that for Tanner Scott, a guy that has been really good, but also has shown us a very wide range of outcomes in his career, I think that alone is kind of the headliner for the package, is great work by Peter Bendix and that Marlins front office.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Lance Brozdowski, I just saw a note from him. He said he still saw 60+% strikes on most of Snelling's offerings. So he's not exactly sure that the command is cratered as much as the walk rate suggests. There may just be, you can have luck in a walk rate, Mm-hmm. It's like, when does the ball come? If it comes 2-0 or 2-1 instead of 3-2. This is a fun one. Orestes Destrade mention on the Live Hive. Love it. Thanks, Jason.
That's a great callback. I've forgotten completely about Orestes Destrade. But yeah, this has been a busy day so far. We saw the Marlins get involved in a trade with the Orioles, where they got 2 guys back that should plug in right away for this lineup. Trevor Rogers joins the Orioles. He's going to start. And you look at what they get back. Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers, 2 guys that are major league ready, that were pretty well blocked in Baltimore. I'm curious, from the Orioles' perspective, what do you think they might change, if anything, with Trevor Rogers to get better results from him? Because he's just not the same guy that he was when he broke into the league from a stuff perspective.
Yeah, and I know people are pointing to like his last 7 starts. He has like a 3.5 ERA, but it's not supported by the peripherals. I mean, he has like an 18% strikeout rate and a 10% walk rate. That is not good. And that, you put that in the AL East, I do not think it produces a 3.50 ERA. So, don't have to look at stuff itself, but you can look at velo. He used to be 95. He's 91 now. I mean, going from 95 to 91. I just feel like, can I talk any faster? No, I can't. I can just do it in bursts. But 91 is not good from Trevor Rogers. I don't know what they're thinking. Actually, I hate this trade for the Orioles. Honestly, if I had to dig down deep and try to figure it out, for the Athletic today, and the best I could figure out is that his sliders had different shapes. So maybe they could go back to a shape he's thrown in the past and say, this one that was a little bit more like a curveball, we like it better. Stuff Plus liked it better when it was kind of a curveball. So maybe, that's a possibility that, they change something about it. Maybe they can unlock some of his mechanics, get back to 95. He has thrown a pitch 95.8 this year, so maybe they could get him to sit 93 again. Maybe he's been mailing it in. Maybe 93 is still in there. Maybe he's just 91 because, hey, I'm on the Marlins. This sucks. So, I don't know, but, it's generally a change-up first guy who hasn't thrown a good breaking ball almost ever in his career and whose fastballs are giving up nearly 500 slugging this year. So I don't know what they're thinking, but I did notice that when I looked at the projections for Norby and Stowers, they were both for below average offense, which surprised me a little bit. But I think that's irrelevant for the Marlins. They're close. They have some ability. Getting guys like Norby and Stowers, if you're the Marlins, I think it makes a lot of sense. You got to take a chance on guys. You can plug them in the lineup now. You can give them a chance and see how, I think basically those guys just need more opportunity.
Yeah, and that's what they're going to have in Miami. We do have Britt Giroli with us now, so jump shoot among those in the live hive, wondering what we do with Britt. Britt's been doing double duty, trying to confirm moves while joining the show. But Britt, we know the Orioles' prospect depth had made this a possibility to take guys like Norby and Stowers and move them in deals, and maybe there's still more to come for them. What are your expectations for both of these guys now that they should have a clear runway of playing time for the rest of this season and through 2025 in Miami?
Yeah, well, I think part of the reason, you're talking about the projections being kind of low on those guys is that neither of those guys fit long-term into the Orioles' plans. They simply haven't gotten the playing time. And I think they both logged like 1,000 plate appearances in AAA. So a guy like Stowers in particular, I know, about 2 weeks ago, the Orioles said to him, like, look, we know you're blocked. We know you deserve to be in the big leagues. We're going to try to trade you. So it was not really a big surprise that he was included in this deal. And on paper, I also hate this trade for the Orioles. But the longer I think about it, the more it's like, okay, if Stowers is blocked and he's not going to fit into their plans, if Norby also really doesn't have a consistent path to playing time, the Orioles almost have so many riches that they almost are okay overpaying because neither of these guys are going to be on the big league team. So is it worth getting Rogers? No, it's really not. But what's the flip side? Having these guys at AAA where eventually they peak, right? Eventually their value peaks and you're not going to be able to do anything with them. So I understand it a little bit from that perspective. I think Stowers can be a consistent everyday big leaguer, and Norby was just scratching the surface. I mean, he's the 5th best prospect in the Orioles system, means he's probably a top 3 prospect in most other systems. The Orioles are just so loaded, that's what it is. So these are guys who are going to slot in right away for the Marlins, who low key, and we're going to get later into the winners and losers, are having a hell of a trade deadline. Just have an absolute haul for Tanner Scott. I mean, they have really decided we're going to go all in 9 months after making the playoffs. We're going to burn this down to the studs. And they are picking the right trade deadline to do that because it is absolutely a seller's market.
I think that was really smart to bring up their age. Kyle Stowers is 26. I believe Norby is already 24. What you have among prospect circles, and when you're trading, you have kind of little expiration sell-by dates a little bit. And,
yeah.
once you get to, I'm trying to trade this 28-year-old or 27-year-old, people aren't really listening anymore. I mean, part of the math there is just that players tend to peak at 26. So, if you got Stowers at 26, you're not going to sell him for any more down the road.
I think the other question that's kind of coming out of the live hive right now is, are you confident the Orioles are a good organization for pitchers beyond the park and the changes they've made that have made it a much more pitcher-friendly home park? Do they make pitchers better? My lean is yeah, and I think Kyle Bradish, his development pre-injury is a good sign. I think you take a look at some of the, like John Means, even before that, was a kind of a pop-up guy. They found Albert Suarez, brought him back over. He's been really nice for them as a back-end guy. So I think there is an ability to identify talent, can coach it up a little bit, and maximize ability. So even if Rogers is a number 4 starter for them, they've needed pitching for the last couple of years. We talk about it a lot on this show, and usually we're aiming higher than this, but it doesn't mean that they can't continue to find upgrades. Maybe this winter they'll get the big ace to replace Corbin Burns, or they'll extend Burns and add something then.
Yeah, I want to push back slightly on that because they got Jack Flaherty last year, and I remember being on this podcast with you guys, and we all were like, this is not a good move, right? We didn't really see the path there. It seemed like kind of the safe. Oh,
and then we said maybe they'll make him better. Maybe they'll get the.
Maybe they see something,
and they didn't get anything out of him.
So I mean, they have a little bit of a track record, but I also just wonder, with so many starters seemingly available and with such a wealth of prospect capital. Last year they played it safe, and we said, okay, well, they played it safe. They're at the beginning of their window. How many years, if this is it for them? And it just may well be, we're 15 minutes to the deadline. How safe is too safe, right? Did they go too safe? I think they went a little too safe here. I know they got Corbin Burns to start the season, and we kind of all forget about that. And that was the big splash.
Oh, breaking news. Just as you said it.
Did they get
Eloy Jimenez.
Okay. So they're making other moves, because to me,
but it's still not an arm. It's kind of funny.
This was a little bit of a disappointing trade deadline on that front, because it felt like, okay, last year could be excused as the beginning of their window. Okay, they have so many guys now. Is this the time? But again, if we saw what the Astros had to pay to get a rental, we saw the price here for Rogers. Like, was it just going to be too much to land some of these guys? Are they better off waiting until the winter? You can make that case. You can also make the case that if they go away in the first round, like they did last year, because they don't have any pitching, that we're going to say they squandered another year where these guys were under team control. So it is a really difficult situation to be in. And I don't envy Mike Elias in that front office at all, because you are trying to kind of thread the needle here between long-term sustainability and, quote, going for it this year. And it's just a very tricky situation to be in.
Yeah, and I think, to some extent, there's a math that every team does that's a contender that says, who is our playoff starter? Like, is this a starter who gets us there? Then I just want to give you something really small and just get a rental, or just a guy who's guy can plug in for a while. Or is this a guy who's going to start a playoff game for me? And they may have looked around and said, we probably have our playoff starters here right now. And so we're just in at least in Grayson Rodriguez and Corbin Burns. So maybe they just didn't think that they needed to go. But this is Trevor Rogers is kind of a weird in between too, because he's not a playoff starter, but you've got him for a couple of years. So it's kind of acquiring depth for many deadlines. I don't know. It's a little bit of a weird one. And Eloy Jimenez is kind of a funny fit too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a funny fit for the Orioles, because I guess he's just going to DH.
Right. Yeah. Makes things a little more crowded in a position player group that's been crowded.
Yeah, this is
I hadn't thought they need a bat
for me. I mean, he's getting, it looks like $13 million in the final year of that 6-year, $43 million deal. The White Sox obviously just looking for anybody to take him, any takers at this point in time. And
Eflin is a good find.
I have no problem with the Eflin move. I think that is a solid number 3 starter.
One.
However, because they're missing so many guys, I felt like they needed to move more towards that, like, get another 3, get 2 3s. I don't consider Rogers a 3. He is a 5.
Yeah.
He's a 5 that, as you wrote, might be better in the bullpen, but they're not going to put him in the bullpen. They need him as a starter. They got him as a starter. So I have no problem with the Eflin move. I thought it was going to be Eflin and maybe a higher end pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I wonder if Rogers.
I put Kikuchi on every team.
Yeah, he was your Seth Lugo of the deadline, where you were just placing him everywhere, and everybody was interested. You could tell by the price the Astros had to pay to get him. I wonder if we'll see Rogers kind of work like Andrew Heaney in the postseason, where he'll fall to the rotation, but he'll chew up 2 innings here and there in games where a starter
get
goes
a bunch
short.
of lefties in a row. Yeah,
that might be the way they decide to deploy him in those.
Although
spots.
his changeup is his best pitch, so it might be righties. Who knows?
We're keeping an eye on the news to see if anything else trickles in here. Lane Thomas traded yesterday, sent to Cleveland in a 4-player swap. This is a hard one for me, because I know this makes the Guardians better. The hardest thing for me to figure out is Lane Thomas still being below average against righties, even though he just had a breakout in 2023, right? There's legitimate speed There's some power. He's an above average regular despite being a below average hitter against righties each of the last 4 seasons. So as much as I like this move for the Guardians because it gives their lineup some depth, I'm wondering how long the Lane Thomas gravy train can keep rolling.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because as I wrote for our trade grades for The Athletic, people forget you can grade this trade in a vacuum, or you can look at it as the Nationals turned 2 months of John Lester into Lane Thomas, which is how they originally got to this point. And then they turned it into a whole bunch of more prospects. I don't have a huge problem with this deal from Cleveland's side. It's a smaller, upgrade, a marginal upgrade for an offense that all of a sudden looks like it needs some real help. Lane Thomas last year was the year to trade Lane Thomas. That would have been the quote unquote haul or the peak of the Lane Thomas projections. As you said, he had a career year. My issue with the Nats
should have traded him last year.
Yeah. My issue with the Nats return, and I think we'll feel that way about Kyle Finnegan, who doesn't look like he's getting moved because the asking price is too high. I think we'll look back on that next year and say they should have dealt Kyle Finnegan when his price was this high. Look what Tanner Scott just got. I think from the Nationals' point of view, they're kind of selling we're going to be good very soon. They've got all these young guys that are up now. Mackenzie Gore and CJ Abrams and James Wood just came up. And then they get these prospects that are in A ball. And I kind of figured they would be targeting guys who are a little closer to Major League ready. The guys they got really, the prospects involved in this deal, the 2 prospects, there's one utility player as well, 2027, 2028 for Major League readiness. And so to me, that's just a hard
It's
sell.
very different from the Marlins, who got a lot of players who are right at the cusp.
Exactly.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, what you have, I think, when you make that decision is, yes, there are timelines. So it's good for you to point that out. If they're close, why are they getting these young guys? But with the young guys, you sometimes get more upside. And if you count on your scouts, you say, oh, our scouts were really good with Abrams and Wood. And let's take the guys who are further away where it's more scouting, I think, than numbers. The closer you get to the big leagues, the more the numbers mean something. That's why the A's have often gotten guys who are close to the big leagues because they're like, hey, those guys, the projections are more solid. You can believe them. The guy's done this in AAA. You can believe he can do this in baseball, and
that's a great point.
Baseball.
Yes. And to be fair, James Wood was a guy who was 18 years old when they got him in the Soto trade.
Right.
It was all about Gore and Abrams.
Maybe he goes fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Though I did hear that AJ Preller, who I think we can all attest is a bit of a savant with the drafting and finding these guys, was heartbroken over Wood. That was the one guy he didn't want to trade. And people were like, you're crazy. He's 18. He's got really low energy. Come to find out that's just the way he plays. And also he's going to be a superstar. So, AJ Preller is, you could say what you will about that guy. He seems to be excellent at identifying and drafting talent. And the Padres keep dealing from a farm system that should be depleted by now. They just keep restocking and reloading.
Only Ethan Salas is left right now.
Yeah.
The funny thing for me, though, is that the Guardians are almost like what we were saying about the Orioles last year. They're forever too safe. They're in first place. I don't know, like a second ago, they had the best record in the big leagues. Is that true?
Yeah.
What was it? How close are they to the best record in the big leagues? They have the best record. They have the most wins in baseball.
Yeah.
They're tied with the Phillies. So then they go out and they get Alex Cobb and Lane Thomas. And if Lane Thomas is below average against righties, as you said, Will Brennan is actually average against righties. So did they just get a short side platoon extra outfielder and Alex Cobb, who just popped a blister?
Yeah.
I like Alex Cobb.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a little bit negative.
Is a great way to put it. Now, this is a team in a front office, though, that prioritizes wins per dollar, right? Not just wins.
Which he really seems to. This is like the Fangraphs 2005.
Yeah. And it's almost office. And it's again, kind of what we're seeing. It's kind of the drawback of these very smart, very savvy, very risk-averse model front offices. Sometimes you just got to go for it. And that's why having the AJ Prellers and the Dave Dombrowskis of the world, sometimes prospects are prospects, right? Sometimes you just got to push your chips in. And you're right, for Cleveland, we talked about their pitching staff on the podcast and how we don't think they're going to hold up. Is Alex Cobb enough for you to say this is a World Series team? And why not? Can't we say this is a World Series? There's no reason why Cleveland can't have World Series aspirations. We are past the halfway mark. As you said, their record speaks for itself. It is a little underwhelming.
Yeah.
Apologies to everybody who's dealing with audio issues. We don't know why they're happening. Our feeds all seem fine. We can all hear each other at normal levels. So if you're getting choppy audio, very sorry. Maybe try closing the stream and coming back in. I don't know if that'll fix it either, but hopefully the podcast version will at least be clean if people start dropping off. We'll keep tracking the news here, try to fix the audio issues if there's anything we can do. We did see Jorge Soler get traded to Atlanta. Again, it worked last time. Ronald Acuna Jr. tore an ACL, so they get some power back. What's the expectation here? We got breaking news?
Yeah.
Jack Flaherty to the Dodgers.
Hey, do we have the return yet?
There it is. And Garrett Crochet not going anywhere.
Garrett Crochet not going anywhere.
Oh, no. We got the Garrett Crochet staying put news
the big
also.
Fat F for the White Sox this trade deadline, but we'll get into that later. Yeah, I like the Flaherty to the Dodgers because that is an organization that has a penchant for finding, Flaherty has pitched really well. He's not the reclamation project that the Orioles were getting last year. He's pitched very well. He's in an organization that is going to make sure he continues to pitch really well. We haven't seen the return yet, but, Andrew Friedman has had himself very quietly a very good deadline now. When you look at between this, the 3-team trade, the Dodgers are getting healthier. They are going to be an absolute juggernaut. Now you add Jack Flaherty to that rotation. I don't know what you guys' initial reacts on that, but this was a market where a lot of people wanted Jack Flaherty. So I'm curious how much they gave up, but I almost don't care because this is a win now Dodgers team, obviously.
So what's different this year? We talked about Flaherty at last year's deadline. The concern was that he sat right around a velo threshold with the fastball that really made his effectiveness waver. Why will it be different in these final 2+ months with the Dodgers?
No, it's the exact same thing. It's amazing. He's averaged 93.5 this year on the 4-seamer, and that seems like not much off of 93.1 for last year. But I have the numbers in front of me. Over 94 miles an hour, Jack Flaherty has, let's see here, this is under 94. He has a 280 batting average, 390 OBP, 460 slugging on the fastballs with an 18% whiff. Over 94, it's 253, 327, 349 slugging with 27% whiffs. I mean, I think that's a pretty big shelf. And what you see if you look at his velocity over time this year is that it's going down. And if you look at his results, they're going down. And I think that one of the things that happens when we look at a player like this is we see the good results at the beginning and they're supported by a good velocity and a great strikeout minus walk rate. And we don't really check back in on our priors. So, for example, he had like 94 plus velo early. I mean, there were some 95 games in March and April, and his K-BB in March and April was 30%. In May, it was just under 30%. In June, it was 25%. In July, when he started falling under 93 in some games, it was 19.7%. So his results have been slowly going back down to kind of where we thought he was before. The stuff has been going down. The velo has been going down. And it's all happening right around this shelf. We did see, the first couple of games that he goes to Baltimore last year after we talked about this, he did throw 94 plus. And he did, I think, have a good debut with the Orioles last year, but he wasn't able to keep it up. And so I kind of see this telling the same story of him kind of just not being as good as we thought he was, because everyone's going to look at the K-BB and look at, say, oh, it's top end stuff from, beginning of the season, but it hasn't been quite the same since. I mean, let me see what I have for him on the last game was all right. And that's probably a little bit of like, oh, I see the trade deadline coming and I'm about to get traded. Oh no, 92.8 in his last game. And he's had a 92.2 since June started. So, it's definitely, the trend is downward in his velo, and that bothers me because he's a 2-pitch pitcher mostly.
The Rays acquired Dylan Carlson as well. There's a bunch of moves trickling in. And I said this earlier on Twitter, they only have to be agreed upon at 6. So sometimes it takes a while for them to kind of trickle out. The Rays, maybe the best deadline. What do you guys think? There's been
Padres got Martin Perez.
A lot of late deals trickling in.
Rays and Marlins, I tried to drop out of the stream and come back to see if that fixed the audio issue, and everything's the same for me and still bad for everybody else. So again, apologies for those on stream who just aren't hearing us well, but we'll just keep going and we'll get the pod version out at the end, and that'll be that. Sorry again for the problems all, but I think both Florida teams have done really well. They've been active, they've gotten volume back, but they've gotten some quality back as well. And I think when you look at Dylan Carlson in particular, we've wondered for years if there was one more gear there because of the type of hitter he was coming through the Cardinals system. They just haven't been able to maximize the ceiling that we thought he had. Tampa Bay is one of those places hitters go with sometimes limited power or an approach that needs to be tweaked. The tweak happens and they reach a new level. So as far as places Dylan Carlson could have landed, that's about as good as it gets from a hitting instruction and development standpoint.
Yeah. Exactly. And the Cardinals have low-key, I think, had a pretty decent trade deadline as well. They get reliever Sean Armstrong back. They kind of were targeting today bullpen depth. They obviously were involved in that 3-team trade earlier in the week. But I think the Rays have put on a clinic as to how to reset and reload. The Marlins as well. I mean, look, you look at this market, like we said, it's a seller's market. So if you were a fringy team, maybe it benefited you, but the teams that decided, you know what, we're going all in, we're selling down to the studs, have really come out strong. I mean, Arozarena, Pham, Isaac Paredes. I don't think anyone saw that one coming. I mean, you look at what the Rays have done and what they've cleared payroll-wise and what they've brought back. The same thing for the Marlins. These are organizations in much better situations than they were a week or two ago. So I really like what both of these teams have done. If there's going to be winners of the deadline, go ahead.
I'm going to push back a little bit on the Rays.
Oh,
and you know what's coming. I mean, they're above 500. Like I know that they're in a hard division, but I was a little surprised to see them trade off guys who could have been with the team for years to come. I don't know. It's a little bit that the cynicism in me reaches a certain level when you start to think about their stadium deal. And are they like potentially like taking a step back on purpose in order to be have more in place when the stadium is in place or something? I don't know. They weren't that expensive of a team. They didn't have to cut money. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
But maybe this is just what they've always done and I should just be quiet.
This is what they do in cycles, and they haven't been bad in a while, so they kind of have to reset.
But they aren't bad.
They aren't bad. They're 3.5 back in the wild card. They're not a team who you look at it and you're like, okay, you look at the American League, though. Are they better than Cleveland? Are they better than Baltimore? Are they better than Houston? Are they better than the Yankees?
But how
Are they
about
better
this?
than the Twins? Like the Royals just got better. I agree with you, but what if they had just done the safe trade deadline thing? Then we'd be knocking them like we're knocking some of these other teams if they just made marginal fringy upgrades, right? They had two choices. They do the fringy upgrades and play for the wild card, or they burn it to the studs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Those were really their two options.
I think one team I think of that's kind of, and I also think there's so many different perspectives you can take when you're analyzing this. You can take it from the competitiveness standpoint. You can take the, whether they make it this year standpoint, whether they make it over many years standpoint. Do we take the standpoint more of sort of the front office, or we take the standpoint more of fans? And sometimes I think the standpoint of fans gets dropped behind. And so would you rather be a fan of the Giants right now or the Rays? Because both of them are like 3.5 teams, just in terms of the trade deadline they had. They're both about 3.5 games back. They both sold to some extent, but the Giants are keeping Blake Snell, it looks like, and they're trying to just sell off the pieces that were most expensive and stay in it. I don't know. It seems a little bit painful to me to be a Tampa Bay Rays fan.
Sure.
It's the way they've existed though. Forever.
That's the same thing with the Marlins, though. 9 months ago, they won a playoff game. You could say the same thing about both of those organizations, though, can't you? Instead of just picking on Tampa Bay.
I don't think the Marlins were healthy under the hood in terms of, they may have won a playoff game, but I don't think that it was a great organization right away. And I feel like the Rays are a better team than selling as much.
But the Marlins
it's a little bit weird.
Sold by like May. They were done by remember they've been waving the white flag since basically opening day, it feels like. And they traded Luis Arraez.
What's strange for me is that I look at the returns the Rays got, and Christopher Morel is a fun player. We talked a lot about him on the Monday episode. Where is he going to play defensively? Second base tonight? Is that going to work in the long run? No idea. I don't know if they can make him a passable defender at any infield position, but they at least will try. They have a core of good pitching. Taj Bradley's having a breakout year. Shane Baz is healthy again. Shane McClanahan comes back eventually. Pepio looks like a nice pickup from the Glasnow deal. Jeffrey Springs is healthy now. We know they can always find relievers. Trading Randy Arozarena, it was like inevitable, but it doesn't make me any less sad for Rays fans because he was one of their impact guys. He was one of those guys that has showed up on the big stage for them, but also had the ability to be a consistent above average regular. And I think the hard thing that is similar with both the Rays and the Giants is the extreme mixing and matching on top of the selling at the deadline when you do have at least a chance of going to the playoffs. Like that's hard, but the mixing and matching I think always makes it hard to get really like into a roster. So when you have a player like Randy Arozarena and you trade him away, that stings a little bit more because he's not one of your semi-regulars. He's one of your recognizable stars.
Yeah. I agree with that. Listen, I don't think it's a fun deadline if you're a Rays fan by any means, but I think the alternative is just half selling, right? And then do you really get any better or half going for it? I don't know. I like teams that pick a lane dramatically, whether that's sellers or buyers. Like this is the time to create excitement in the sport for these bigger deals to go through. And I think if you're Tampa Bay, you're looking at it as like, is this a World Series team? Probably not. So yeah, I guess operating under Tampa Bay's constraints, right? Like Cleveland approaches this the same way, but they're even safer. If Tampa Bay had Cleveland's record, I think they would be a little more aggressive, don't you? A little more creative.
They've done some things like the Nelson Cruz trades. Yeah, they've done some things in the past.
They've been creative when it comes to these kinds of things.
They supposedly offered some big one-year deals to some of the bigger free agents that have come and gone. So
they're supposedly Judge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I like what they do generally. This trade deadline, I was like a little surprised in a negative way that they sold so hard. I think it's really easy to like what the Marlins have done. I think that they needed to do this. They couldn't field a really good lineup. They haven't in a long time. Maybe 1 year that was okay, but they really needed position players, and they got a lot of close position players, and they did it really fast. So that's an easy win for me. In terms of buyers, who are your favorite winners?
The Dodgers. I like the Dodgers, what they just did.
Dodgers, that's Flaherty. And who else they got?
Flaherty, they got Edmund in the 3-team swap.
Derek and I think might just be their starting shortstop.
We did one other thing. I feel like we need a list because so many deals are trickling in that I'm getting confused.
Yeah, Kopech was part of that deal too.
They got Kopech. Okay, I was like, wait, they got another reliever.
Big time reliever, yeah.
Yeah. So, and honestly, I think that they were one of the bigger winners on the buyer side. I like what the Cardinals did a lot too. I mean, we know the mandate from ownership to not add
was not to spend any money.
To add. So then, you have to, again, not approach it too much from the fan side, but kind of also thread the needle. And I think what Mozeliak did in kind of swapping guys and getting involved in that 3-team trade so that they could address their concerns.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, Brandon Donovan kind of made Edman a little bit, and Mason Wynn made Edman expendable. And you took that $8 million and you turned it into an outfielder that could help you now as a rental. And it is funny, Tommy Pham coming back, but
yes,
I don't love Fetty, but he is totally a Cardinals type starter, and he fits right in.
I honestly think the White Sox shouldn't even have gotten involved in that trade because they were totally fleeced in the Fetty Kopech return. When you look at what they got, really was not. Yeah, steals can still trickle in. I said this before. They only need to be agreed upon. So just because they're agreed upon doesn't automatically mean the media know. Someone's asking in our live stream about that. But really, it's like a half an hour. By 6:30, if you haven't heard, your team is done. Right? That's
the Red Sox just got Luis Garcia, who I had Luis Garcia as a top 5 option among rental relievers by Stuff Plus. And that's great because that's funny. The Red Sox got Lucas Sims, who was second on that rental reliever stuff, plus this Tanner Scott, and Luis Garcia, who I think was fourth or fifth. And they did not go to the table for Tanner Scott. So I kind of like that, going and getting the second and fourth options for a lot cheaper than being at the table at the first.
Yeah. I like the Mets too as like sneaky winners here as buyers. They very quietly, David Stearns remade that bullpen without giving up very much. The Paul Blackburn deal, again, really gave up a fringy, he's like 28th or 29th prospect for a guy who isn't going to light the world on fire in Blackburn, but he's been a serviceable starter. They're missing Kodai Senga. They're not certain what's going to happen with Christian Scott, and they have him pass this year. And when you look at what the market has been like for starting pitchers, I think they really didn't give up a lot, and they got better without sacrificing their future. So I think they're one of like the quieter, maybe not the splashy Dodger winners, but a really solid like B+ if I had to grade deadline for the Mets.
I think you got to give the Mariners at least a B, if not a little better. I mean, Randy Arozarena makes that team a lot better. They have him beyond this season, so they fixed a longer-term problem at the deadline. They made the bullpen even better because they added Yimi Garcia. They got JT Chargois as a small trade today, so 2 more relievers, one of them being a really good high-leverage guy. We talked about the quality of that rotation last week on our live stream with Trevor. And when you have a rotation as good as the Mariners do, Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, Bryce Miller, if that quartet stays healthy, you really shouldn't ever punt a season. You should continue trying to build around that because having pitching that good is rarely something that lasts several years. Take advantage of it while you can. And I think they at least did that in a decent way. Maybe they could have made one more move for depth, and maybe that'll still trickle in. They did add Justin Turner for some infield I guess depth as well. So kind of replacing Ty France with Turner.
Offense seems like the hardest thing to buy at the deadline. We've seen some bigger deals for guys like Manny Machado and stuff like that in the past, and they've found ways to do it, I think, without harming their future that much. So I like what they did. A small shout out for the Yankees, who weren't that super active, but I think the Jazz Chisholm trade was really good.
Yeah.
That team sorely needed a little bit of foot speed. They're second to last in stolen bases. They need a guy who can play on the infield right now. At second and third is a little bit of a problem for them in both those places. I think Jazz can play there. We haven't seen Jazz play third base, but this is a former shortstop who played second base all right. I think he can do third. I think he has the arm for it. So doing that and then adding Mark Leiter Jr., to the bullpen, who's not just a rental, I thought they did all right.
Yeah, I'd say they're in the C. Missing a starter. It seems like they missed out on all the starters, though, right?
Whew. Britt's a tough grader.
Well, they were supposedly shopping Cortez, so they feel like the year that they traded Jordan Montgomery away, they feel like they have their playoff rotation set. It is, Cole and Heel, and they've got what they want, and Cortez is on the outside.
I think the key there, we talked about
starters, then?
I think like 3 weeks ago.
But I think they were only looking for top end. They were looking for Crochet if they can get Crochet. But they don't.
Cole
they weren't
scratched today with total body soreness.
That wasn't great.
C is average.
Yeah, he had a stomach bug.
Average deadline. There's nothing wrong with this.
They weren't going to trade for Trevor Rogers. They weren't going to trade for. They had. That's another thing that I think Yankee Stadium is really hard to pitch in. So they can't just trade for somebody that might be okay. They kind of have a little bit of a higher bar when they're acquiring pitchers.
I thought they might get one more option to help at first base, but maybe by having Jazz moving all over the place, they just play a little more DJ LeMahieu there, just do a strict platoon with Ben Rice, getting the starts against righties, LeMahieu playing mostly against lefties, but that seemed like an opportunity to possibly get another bench piece. Not like there's a lot of impact guys out there, but something could have helped them in that regard. There were a lot of relievers on the move. Lucas Erceg is kind of an underrated player for a lot of people. He's a converted position player, just started pitching a few years ago in the Brewers system before ending up in Oakland, debuting there. And he took a pretty big step forward already this year. And I was looking at the pitching plus model. By model, he's got 3 above average pitches. He throws 4 different pitches. He's got above average location numbers too. And given that he hasn't been pitching for that long, there's not only the possibility he just keeps getting better, there's a chance there might be a starter in there long term, even though he's been used as a short reliever up to this point.
I mean, given the whole story of, drinking his way out of Cal and ending up at Menlo College with Jason Ochart, who's the director of hitting for Boston Red Sox, and then, being drafted in the 3rd round as a third baseman, hitting 35 tanks in the minor leagues for the Brewers, and then stalling out and changing to a reliever. Like, I don't know. I feel like his arm is fresh, and from my conversations with him, he's just now kind of getting to understand the craft of pitching. Like, I was talking to him about some stuff that most pitchers nowadays are used to talking about, like their movement on their pitches, their spin axis and stuff like that. And he's like, I'm just finding out about this stuff, man. I'm just, I'm just trying to get comfortable as a pitcher. So, there's some upside there. What I also like is Hunter Harvey, Lucas Erceg, James MacArthur. It may not feel exactly like those old bullpens that, the power bullpens that brought the Royals a championship, but it's closer than it's been in a long time. I mean, there's definitely some better stuff in that Royals bullpen than there has been for a while. And I laud them for putting it together in a way also that won't just disappear at the end of the year.
No.
All 3 of those guys are there next year.
That's why I think we should give them a shout out as well. They add DeYoung, as I said, for another bench bat. I mean, I think the Royals had, for a team that was so active in the winter and has kind of played fringy, right? Where we're like, well, are they in it? Are they going to, we kind of wondered on the pod, are they going to do anything like more? Are they going to push forward? I talked to someone in Kansas City that was like, we believe we can do it. We believe with the way Bobby Witt Jr. is playing, we believe in the way the division is going, that we still have a chance. And I think they made some really smart moves that, like you said, don't sacrifice the future. And that's where Kansas City needs to play. They need to thread that needle and play in that playground of get better today, but also not sacrifice tomorrow. I would give Kansas City like a B. I think they had a really solid offseason. I think going out and getting Hunter Harvey early was big. They're a team that is trying to go for it.
They avoided the kind of pressure cooker that was today,
Yes.
when all of a sudden, oh, well, look what they got for Tanner Scott. We want more, it's like, let's just get Hunter Harvey 3 or 4 days before and, not worry about like having to compete with everybody. I thought that was a pretty sneaky good move. The projections don't like Mike Lorenzen. They never have, but for the last, 3 years, he's had like a 4.0 ERA, basically. He has a big old wide arsenal. I know pitching coaches love getting a wide arsenal guys. They always think, oh, I can do this with that or this with that. And so I think he's a great way to make a strength of theirs better. They have the 3rd best rotation by Fangraphs WAR this year.
Really? Well, Lugo has been so good. And I think not enough people have talked about the year that he's had, betting on himself to be a starter. Yeah, I like Kansas City. It's very easy to get lost today. I like what they did overall at the deadline for sure.
There's a funny thing for me happening. I'm local, so San Francisco is right here. But I'm having like a sort of head versus heart moment with the Giants trade deadline. I hate it with my heart, and I understand it with my head. There's just some late breaking news that the Giants got Mark Canha. This is kind of the Farhan thing that he does sometimes. He's done this before. It's a little bit like the Jerry DiPoto thing where he trades away one piece and he gets it back another piece that's almost as good. Remember, what was it? He traded away Davinsky and everyone was mad about. No, he traded away Kendall Graveman and everyone was mad about that. But in the next trade, like a day later, he got a reliever, but it was a rental reliever. And he was just trying to as you've been saying, thread the needle. He's just trying to. And I understand that taking the money, the Jorge Soler money off the table for next year gives him more flexibility. I understand that. And this is obviously a team that needs to buy more to get better. And that Jorge Soler at DH did clog them up a little bit. And now with DH open, they can do more things. It gives them a chance to bring Marco Luciano up, whose glove has not really fit anywhere. And now they can just play him sometimes at DH, sometimes wherever, and see what he can do at the major league level. Yeah. But at the same time, I hate it. I hate it. It seems like a too smart. Like you're trying too hard. That's what it feels like. And what we were saying earlier about picking a lane, it's not picking a lane. It is not picking a lane at all. And so some part of me just hates it. And I love Mark Canha. Come on down, Mark Canha.
I want to know what you guys think about the Pirates deadline, because to me, that's kind of one of those like, what?
It's a tepid buy.
Yeah. Like, what?
It's probably just a grade below whatever the Royals grade is for me, because I think
So
Brian
a
De La
C?
Cruz is underrated. They needed a bat. They got a bat, and he's there for more than this year. He's not a rental, so he helps them beyond this season. They got a glove first infielder, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. He can play all over. They've had problems at second base, so if they're not going to get production with the bat at second base, at least they'll have a great defender there. That'll help run prevention. So I'm okay with that.
Sold and bought at the same time, selling Martin Perez and buying Kiner-Falefa and Brian De La Cruz.
Yeah.
And Josh Walker. Like, they did some really small stuff too, but they kept Aroldis Chapman, which is a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're hanging around.
They're kind of,
I think their deadline was okay. I think it was appropriate for where they're at right now. Trying to get a little bit better, not a bad idea.
They also had the biggest challenge trade, I think. Quinn Priester for Nick York.
Yeah, I like that one. I think that's, if it's not my favorite trade from the deadline, it's like in the top 3
close
for me. It's just
fun.
Yeah, it's really a really interesting trade. I also, one of my favorite trades of the deadline, that's just a small little trade that I just really love, is the Austin Hayes for Sir Anthony Dominguez and Christian Pache deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because they realized they needed a center fielder against lefties, because they've been sitting Mullins against lefties, and that Kowser's not really a great center fielder. So they go and get Christian Pache, who is a great defensive center fielder, but shouldn't play unless it's against a lefty, really, because the bat's not good. So that was a better fit than Austin Hayes, who they don't really want to play in center.
Yeah.
So Anthony Dominguez has the good stuff, but had been wild this year. That's the price for maybe getting a full-time starter in left field. Like, Austin Hayes may end up the full-time starter in left field for the Phillies.
Yeah.
A little bit of like shifting things around to hope to get a better fit out of a couple players.
Are we a little surprised the Angels didn't do more? The Carlos Estevez and Luis Garcia trades, you could kind of see those coming from a mile away. Maybe something else will come in here in the next little while, but Luis Rengifo didn't help somebody else. Yeah, Matt Moore. Really surprised to see both of those guys still there.
Surprised the White Sox didn't burn it down a little bit more. You guys surprised at the lack of top 100 prospects? I think up until
gone.
There weren't any really top 100 prospects traded up until, let's see, maybe for Flaherty here now. Flaherty,
yeah, Robbie. Well, the Robbie Snelling
might have been.
I think he dropped out of a lot of top 100s, like the mid-season updates, but he was there going into the season.
Probably not many. I mean, remember the the Sale trade, Juan Moncada.
Yes, it was the only trade in the last 30 years where they've traded a number 1 overall prospect.
There you go.
Didn't someone write about that?
Which was Moncada.
That's done.
Which also, spoiler alert, Jackson Holiday wasn't traded. Like, people think the Orioles are going to do these crazy things, and they just are in like tepid buy stuff. But anyway.
No.
Benjamin's dropping a C- on the Brewers. I mean, again, I look at the whole window, like last couple of weeks. They added Savali a little early. So you take Aaron Savali, you get Frankie Montas, and kind of a strange deal with the Reds. Joey Wiemer was just an extra outfielder for the Brewers. Wasn't going to get on the big league roster anytime soon. Great defender.
Garrett Mitchell got healthy, so they started to have a lot of outfielders.
Yeah, had plenty of depth. It was interesting to me that Jake Junis went back the other way. I think that goes back to something we talked about on Monday's show. Probably financials, just balancing it out, right? Not adding too much payroll.
Yeah.
Montas, I think, gives you more length than Junis. Junis' strikeout rate's down this year. It's really one great pitch. You can get through the lineup one time in long relief. You could throw an opener in front of a guy like that. Montas, maybe you can get away with using him for 5 innings at a time. So maybe that's the difference between the two. And
save the bullpen to some extent.
Yeah, and getting Montas.
They kept Devin Williams. There were a lot of people saying 1.5 years left. That's when they traded Josh Hader.
I know David Stearns is gone. A lot of those front office people are still there. I think they learned from that. And Trevor McGill just went on the IL too.
There was a lot of backlash, right?
Oh yeah, that was an unpopular move in the clubhouse at the time. So maybe a C- because the reason, if you're going to be hard on the Brewers, I think the thing they needed with the Yelich injury, even though he's not having surgery, they needed one more bat. One more impact bat, because if Yelich comes back, has a setback, and then ends up being done for the season, or if he doesn't make it back, I think you're one impact bat, or at least one above average bat light. There's a lot of ways they can get there. We've talked about Jackson Churriel being better. A great second half from Rhys Hoskins is possible. So there's a few guys that could be better, but maybe it's calling up Tyler Black or something along those lines where they end up trying to find that extra player. I thought they would trade for a veteran to fill that spot.
Yeah.
Wow.
We
The
talked about
Orioles get
Yeah, go ahead.
the Orioles get Gregory Soto?
Saw that, yeah.
Why are the Phillies trading away relievers? Soto's decent, isn't he? I'm not looking at his ERA. He has good stuff.
We just discussed the Pirates who just sent Martin Perez to the Padres.
And the Orioles get Austin Slater?
There's all these weird deals.
Orioles get the weirdest deadline.
They're the stellar buyers. They're the stellar buyer. Weird stuff going on.
Oh my God.
But what do you guys got on the Padres? Because this was a big swing, and it's either going to go down as like a terrific move because now they basically have a super bullpen, supercharged
the
bullpen.
Bullpen is good,
right? We knew they needed a starter. They had Perez. That's kind of not really a deal that moves the needle. But when you look at this bullpen, guys, with Tanner Scott, who is the best closer available, you add him to Robert Suarez, right? You look at really the whole back half of this. Jason Adam, Jeremy Estrada, Adrian Morejon. I mean, this is a super pen, pretty much.
They have the 6th best WRC plus in baseball so far this year, which surprised me a little bit, although I know it's been pretty good. And what's kind of cool about that, I think, is they haven't had Tatis for a while, and Manny hasn't been Manny all year. So there's still a little bit more this team can do offensively. So I guess they thought, we're just going to wait for Tatis to come back and for Manny to continue getting better, and we don't have to push the needle too far defensively. Defensively, there's a little bit of an issue here. At least I'm seeing this by DRS. Let me see here. By DRS, the San Diego Padres are 24th. By UZR, they are 19th. By outs above average, they are, where are they? 19th. So this is a bad team defensively? Does that make sense?
Sort of. I mean, I think when you consider some of the health problems they've dealt with, it makes sense, right? Yeah. I mean, Tatis missing time, Machado missing time,
oh, Manny was
Bogart's
DH
missing time. Bogart's at second should at least be solid, right? So that's probably what it is. That combination of injuries dragging them down a little bit.
10th best overall pitching staff. When it comes to starting pitching, they've been 9th. And they're going to change their 12th best relief corps into something better than that. I mean, if you got everything, let's just give them everything but defense, in the top 5, 6, 7, like not necessarily top 5, but top 10, then you're a contender, right? It's just about getting things to land the right way in the postseason. I mean, it's they asked me on the radio if I thought, if this is a contender, and I do. It's a contender.
Yeah, it's legit. And if they get everybody healthy all at once, that's going to make them a really dangerous
and Musgrove
team.
Still coming back, and Cease looks like an ace. I mean, it is just one of those things where the bad parts seem to be just like in the rearview mirror. Just seem to be like, like you're just like, oh. Now they really only have Ethan Salas left in their farm, right?
But if these core guys are only getting older, though, you kind of have to just go in now. I mean,
what's going to happen when they have $300 million contracts and they're not a good team?
If they win a World Series, no one will care.
If they win a World Series, it won't matter. And if they don't, AJ Preller is going to be long gone when we're asking those questions too. So. Either way,
kind of the only move in my book, I think, if you're AJ Preller, really, because they were playing really well heading into the deadline too. They had a season high 7-game winning streak that was broken on Sunday. They obviously Cease's no hitter was a big deal. So and then as somebody pointed out, they aren't that far behind the Dodgers. Like there is still a chance that they make a real run there, but they're solidly in a wild card spot right now. They got better this deadline. I think this is what you have to do when you have a aging core and a guy like Tatis who just is going to be tough to stay on the field. It feels like over his whole career. You kind of, Manny's not getting younger. Bogarts isn't getting younger. Musgrove has had injury problems. You kind of have to do this. And what we're not mentioning either is Yu Darvish. Like, is he out for the season? Is he coming back? He's been on leave with like a personal reason. If he does come back, that's obviously a boost for them, but I don't know if they're counting on that. They're very much a team that if they get into the playoffs, right, they're sneaky. They get into the playoffs and Tatis is healthy and Musgrove is healthy.
And Manny's Manny, yeah.
Like they're a dangerous team. So I kind of like the going all in
that
here.
NL wild card is going to be intense.
Wild. Yeah.
Braves, Mets, Pirates, Cardinals, Padres, D-backs. Those are 6 good teams. They're all above 500. They're all well above 500. They're not just one game above 500. The Pirates and Cardinals are 2. But, that's 6 teams, and I haven't even mentioned the Giants who, tried to, stay competitive while selling, and the Cubs, which I what did the Cubs get?
That was
what was that?
Are you bringing them up because it's a puzzling deadline? I mean, they traded for Isaac Paredes, so we talked about the implications
of that. Away a reliever
of
out of a bullpen that's bad, but they traded for a reliever that had more stuff, maybe.
Right. So trading away Mark Leiter Jr. is
while
weird.
Trading for Nate Pearson is just a weird combination.
And they kept Tyon.
They kept Tyon.
Yeah.
I think I think the thing is we're going to be good next year. We're just going to re-rack and be good next year.
Well,
they could still be good this year. It's still possible.
Yeah. I'm more convinced the Blue Jays are going to be good next year than the Cubs because I'm a little confounded by the whole thing.
So I saw something
the top
really
prospects
interesting.
Aren't traded anymore. I don't think.
It's changed a lot over the years. So J.J. Cooper, in one of the write-ups I saw at Baseball America today, looked back to the deadlines going all the way to 2015 and found 511 prospects traded during the month of the trade deadline since 2015. So
God, I love J.J. Cooper.
Roughly 40% of those 511 traded prospects haven't reached the majors. Another 41% have produced less than one career F-WAR. So, a lot of players change hands.
Wait, so that's 80% basically didn't do anything.
Either haven't reached the majors yet or haven't made a major impact yet. Some of them will, but that gives you a general idea, right? Like, that's a pretty big window.
There's a bit of a logarithmic thing, too, with the way that, like, top 10 prospects have a much, much better bus rate and better outcomes than even 10 through 20.
Oh, 10
and they're
through 20,
much better than like 20 through 30. And what we see trade at the deadline is 70 plus in terms of ranking, So that's why you get, that's what I would call an 80% bus rate.
Yeah, or at least an 80% disappointment rate.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's any different or any better.
It's still a weird... Teams are still hoarding prospects.
Well, I guess they're thinking like quantity over quality. They're just like, we want to keep all these just in case one of them turns out.
I wonder if there's a way, and this is the thing on the horizon a few years down the road. If club control changes and gets shortened up at some point, or if the cost of club controlled players goes up, arbitration starts earlier, minimum salaries go up considerably at some point. Like, how much of a change do you need in how club control and cost control works before teams are going to cling less to young players? Because that's a huge part of it. It's so... I mean, even think about this, too.
If this guy is good, I get him for 6 years.
Right. Yeah. It's very hard to give up on that, knowing that compared to what you're getting on the free agent market...
3 years, you're like...
But it's like Jake Bloss. If Bloss is a number 4 starter, we know number 4 starters cost like $10 million a year on the free agent market. So... like, that's a pretty big deal for the Jays to get that guy now for someone that they couldn't keep anyway.
Even if he's not that good.
That was the worst deal of the deadline, I think. What do you guys think?
The worst deal as far as you think the Astros overpaid the most?
I like Kikuchi better than a lot of people. And I don't think Loperfito's a regular, so.
You're getting how many starts out of Kikuchi, though? Best case.
12. But if they win the World Series, it doesn't matter.
I do think he is a playoff starter, which is a big deal.
Yeah, and a lot of guys that got moved in the last couple of weeks aren't necessarily guys you want taking the ball in.
The price is high, though. That window, when it shuts on the Astros, is going to slam shut.
Yeah, they kept it open longer than we thought.
Way longer.
It doesn't seem like they have many prospects. I I can't name an Astros prospect that I'm excited about off the top of my head.
Here's the other question for both of you. Like, looking at Atlanta's deadline, they bring back Soler. We know Max Fried's down with neuritis right now in his arm. Ronaldo Lopez had an MRI that came back negative, so his forearm issue that caused him to leave early over the weekend.
So he doesn't have a forearm?
He has a forearm. It's just not torn up. But you look at the way they handled this. They got out in front by acquiring Chris Sale during the offseason. Like, think about the difference in price. Trading for Chris Sale, giving up Vaughn Grissom in a 1-for-1 in the winter versus going out and getting a starter now. And again, hindsight's 2020. Vaughn Grissom has had a lost season marred by injuries and illness, and we can't fully grade that trade for a couple of years. But just in terms of relative cost to what other starters were going for, the timing is so much better. It's like being stuck at the amusement park and having to eat lunch there and just paying ridiculous prices for bad food. That's what the trade deadline becomes if you need starting pitching.
Is Nick York that different than Vaughn Grissom? And Nick York brought back Quinn Priester, not Chris Sale.
Right.
Well, yeah. Well, look at Corbin Burns. What would he have gotten at the deadline? Right? Same thing. Yeah. You're right. It does seem like the better deals can be had in
if
the
you
winter,
can convince somebody in the offseason. That's harder, though, in the offseason because people all think they're going to be good.
That is the main problem. Yeah. Eli to the Orioles was odd, Derek says in the live chat. He's right. This really was about the White Sox just wanting somebody to pick up the salary. Obviously, I'm a little still wondering and have yet to hear any comments on Twitter as to why the Orioles felt like they were the people that needed to pick up the salary, unless, what we said earlier.
Because they just wanted to give up not a good prospect. They'd rather give up. They'd rather just pay the money.
Need lineup help. So, do they see something in Eloy?
You can make a strength better. You can make a strength better. I think you can. He's probably better than their worst hitter.
Yeah, he'd want to play every day necessarily. They could play him 3 or 4 times a week. So I guess that's the way to look at it. If you're stronger top to bottom in your lineup and you didn't give up much to do it, then not a
Sure.
The Royals went out and got Lorenzen. They could have just kept moving Malik Marsh out there and still been a top 3 rotation like they've been, So
yeah,
that's true. You're looking for better at the margins.
Hook'em 355. Would the Tigers have been better off with Loperfido, Will Wagner, and Jake Bloss than what they got from the Dodgers? I gotta grab that.
Aaron Lozano and
Trey Sweeney. Shortstop Trey Sweeney.
I like the Blue Jays return better. I think this, like I said, was the worst trade on the Astros side and maybe the best trade. Most savvy, the deadline from the Blue Jays side, because you are slotting in. Those guys are all pretty much big league ready. Wagner's been at AAA hitting well. Bloss and Loperfido. These are guys that can kind of slot in next year to your team.
Well, Trey Sweeney is in AAA. He's not having a great year. But he's 24, and just last year was 18% better than league average as a shortstop. Good strikeout rate, good walk rate.
People look at Bloss and say, well, he struggled in the big leagues. Well, he played across like 3 or 4 different levels, and if you average all that out, his ERA this year is like 2.4 or something. Like, the guy's going to be good. He's just moved very quickly. So if you just look at his numbers, you could say, well, what did they get here? Well, he was pretty highly regarded in Houston with that system. So, and I think it was Loperfido who had a terrific spring and really kind of showed himself as a non-roster invitee, then ended up making his debut. So I really like that return. I think that was maybe outside of Tanner Scott, which got a haul from the Padres. But Tanner Scott, I think, had a much higher ceiling as the best closer available on the market. So I just think that was, in my mind, probably the best trade of the deadline.
I think the Marlins.
If Sweeney plays on the dirt, it could change the calculus a little bit.
Yeah, someone wrote in that Norby and Stowers are better than Sweeney and Alonso, and they might be right. I mean, I think people are selling short.
That's where the math gets weird for me. Yeah. When I start comparing those deals, I'm like, I think I might rather have Norby and Stowers, maybe. Yeah. I mean, Norby's going to play on the dirt, I think, and I think, I'm not sure Sweeney is. Even his Fangraphs profile says might be a utility guy. The other guy's like Liriano's like a 18-year-old, 19-year-old catcher with a bad arm. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's weird. All this is weird. But I think generally the one thing that maybe take away is that Cooper analysis is just like, like to say someone got fleeced or they gave up too much, or like the likelihood is that most of these guys that got traded today aren't going to move the needle for your organization in the future.
No, and if you
Mo Perfito, like I said, strikes out too much, may not have a defensive home. Sweeney may not have enough power to be an everyday shortstop.
Yeah, that's true.
Mariano might not have the arm. All these things sort of, tend to go in the wrong direction because their own team evaluated them and said, we can give that guy up.
Yeah. But every once in a while you get Lane Thomas for John Lester, and they turn
for 2 months of John Lester.
Yeah.
I forgot all about John Lester with the Cardinals for like a dozen starts 4 years ago.
Was that the time where you couldn't throw to first?
Basically,
that was the Cubs.
Such a low trade that I assumed it was cash considerations, and then they get Lane Thomas.
Mike Rizzo had another good deadline, I think, overall. He's showing us that he's like another Dombrowski. That's the level he's at. He's there. Yeah. He can wheel and deal and turn things around, and he's showing he's got more than one note, I think, in these last couple of deadlines as well. So
yeah, Preller seems to be kind of one note. It's like I make prospects and I sell them.
All gas, no brakes.
Prospects at a crazy clip, though. A crazy clip.
Yeah, I mean, if you scout and find players that other teams like, then that's something you should lean into. Lean into the depth. Just keep going. But a lot of ground covered today, and I'm sure we'll have more on The Athletic here in the days ahead, including some more detailed analysis of the prospects on the move. It's tough to get a good read on some of those guys because they're very lower level players, like guys in the Dominican Summer League, for example. So we lean on Keith Law and Melissa Lockard and our great staff at The Athletic. TheAthletic.com/rates and barrels gets you a subscription. $2 a month gets you in the door. Special shout out to the Live High people who stayed the entire time despite some audio issues. Thank you for your patience. You can find Britt on Twitter at Britt_Droli. Find Eno at Enoceres. Find me at Derek Van Riper. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.